Hey guys, in today's video, I'm going to recommend you guys some amazing humor and satire novels, and this is a very less read genre compared to other very popular genres like, young adult or maybe thrillers and crime and mystery, but satire is so awesome. If you don't know what satire is, I'll tell you the exact definition from a dictionary. Satire is the use of humor, irony, exaggeration, or ridicule to expose people's stupidity or their vices, and it basically makes you laugh, but it also makes you think, which is why I love satire so much. Some of the most famous satire novels are written by George Orwell, about whom I'm going to tell you later in the course of today's video. But before we get into this, today's video is sponsored by Ahmed Fayaz, who is the author of Bestseller, which is basically the dress that I'm wearing as well. It totally matches and it's so funky, right? The reason why I was interested in this book is because this book is a satire on the publishing house, the publishing industry, especially the one in India. Oh my god, that is something that I really wanted to read about. So in this book, there's this guy called Akshay who comes to India because he has lost his job in the UK publishing house. And then he has to work in this publishing house called Kalim Publishing, which is on the verge of getting shut down. He has to bring out 5 bestsellers. Like, no matter what, he has to do that. And he has to turn bestsellers out of books that he can't even read or can't even recommend to anybody. And honestly, this is like a thought that I get so many times, especially when I read some very, very famous Indian authors, like very famous Indian authors. Like, how did these people get published? I have published a lot of rants on some of them already. You may check them out if you find them, because I'm not going to mention that. I don't want to get in any trouble. But the thing is, some books are really, really bad, and I don't have any idea how publishing houses just publish them. And it's probably because they have to bring out bestsellers, and bestsellers happen only out of very bad books most of the times, because in India reading is still like not that popular. All of us, like most of us actually, started reading with Chetan Bhagat, and although Chetan Bhagat was nice when he started, like he is like getting very problematic right now. So the thing is, we really need better reading tastes, and this book is a satire on reading, the publishing industry especially. And that is something that excited me a lot, which is why I picked it up. It's a very special surprise for you from the sponsors. So if you want to know, skip to this time mark so that you can know what is in store for you. And if you want to wait till the end of this video, let's go ahead with it. But if you're interested in reading a book which is about the publishing industry, about a guy trapped within such circumstances that he has to make 5 bestsellers out of shitty books, please make sure you read this book, because I'm pretty sure it's gonna be hilarious. I've just started reading this book and I really loved how it started. On the very first day of this guy's job, his boss died. I mean, that's the biggest nightmare for anyone. Imagine you're going to your first job and your boss dies on the same day. So I'm pretty happy with how this book starts, and I'm hoping that it will be as great till the end. Let's move back about 200 years and talk about Jane Austen. Now, Jane Austen has written a lot of books. Most of them are humor and satire, even though you can't really detect that in the first place, because she is the queen of subversion. She writes things in a way that no normal reader, even an advanced reader, may not like get what she's trying to say in the first sitting, or in the first reading rather. And such 2 books are Pride and Prejudice and Northanger Abbey. Now let's talk about Pride and Prejudice, because it's the most famous book of all time. And let's look at the humor, the hypocrisy, and the sarcasm behind the first line of this book, which is, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a large fortune must be in want of a wife." Now let's stop and think about this. So it says that if a man is very wealthy, he must be in want of a wife. And it is a truth that is universally acknowledged. But that is not the truth. Honestly, Jane Austen writes about just a few people in a small place, and she can't really be talking about universal acknowledgement. Secondly, the times were such that women did not have any property rights. The women did not have any sort of financial privilege. The men were privileged financially. The women were always dependent on their husbands, on their fathers, on their brothers. So if there is someone in want of a spouse, it's not a man, it's a woman. And there are so many awesome lines, especially you see them in the mouth of Mrs. Bennet, who's the mother of 5 girls, and she wants to get them married off. She just wants to get them married off as soon as possible. She does not care which daughter gets married to whom. She just cares if the girls at least get married. And she is absolutely hilarious. And Mr. Bennet also is very hilarious with his use of irony and satire, and so is Elizabeth. Compared to Elizabeth, I think Darcy feels a bit bleak, even though Darcy is like the biggest literary crush of all girls. I'm pretty sure Elizabeth would have done much better as a girl crush. And then there is Northanger Abbey, which is my favorite novel from Jane Austen. There are a lot of people who don't like this book. I think that's probably because they don't know the background of it, because if you don't, you won't understand it. Satire is a very difficult genre to read in general because you need to get the references, else you won't understand it. So in this book, we have a heroine who has been reading gothic novels, you know, strange, scary stories, specifically the mysteries of Udolpho in this. Now she has gone to this place and she's expecting very scary things at every turn, and that gets so hilarious. Honestly, this is sort of a satire on the gothic novel genre, which was sort of like in its boom during Jane Austen's age, and honestly things are not always that scary, right? But I just wonder what Jane Austen would have done if she happened to watch our Hindi serials, because they are way more scary than any sort of gothic novel. And before we move on to our next novel, I have to tell you about this dedication that Jane Austen did for Prince Regent. When he asked for it, she did not like him, but he was the Royal Highness, so she has to comply to his wishes. So this is the dedication that she wrote. To His Royal Highness, the Prince Regent, this work is, by His Royal Highness's permission, most respectfully dedicated by His Royal Highness's dutiful and obedient, humble servant. Now, if you can understand what she's trying to say, she's being very satirical in this statement, and I really loved that. She was like, you know, a badass queen in that century. Now let's come to George Orwell, an author whose books we all have tried to read and we all have given up at some point or the other, and then we have still tried to read and finish it. I am not sure how many of us have. I personally could not finish 1984 completely because it was so difficult. I know everything about the story, I've read critical works on that, but I've not personally finished reading it. I've read Animal Farm. The thing is, George Orwell's books are political satires, and I like Animal Farm better because I have a better understanding of it than 1984. It might be the opposite for you. So there's this animal revolution which happens, and this animal revolution is basically a satire on the Russian Revolution. And if you happen to know what was happening in Russia, about Stalin, about Trotsky, you will understand what's happening in this book, else you won't. What's the most sad thing in the world is that I have seen teachers teaching this book as a part of the curriculum and not telling the children anything about the real revolution, why it's a satire. They just teach it like it's just an animal story, just like an animal story. Nothing of the depth this book actually has, which is very sad. Similarly, 1984 is again one brilliant book. There's a big brother who's watching you at every point of time, and honestly that's scary. Like, it's not as humorous as Animal Farm, but it's still worth your try, and it is one of those books which actually leaves a lasting impact on you. Now, if we have talked about Animal Farm, we have to talk about Bonacci by Perumal Murugan. I read this book earlier last year, and oh my god, I had no idea that an Indian author can write so well. This is brilliant. It's basically about this lamb, you know, Bonacci, and there are statements in this book which get so political. And there are so many statements in this book which attack the government, the way we are being ruled. And one of my favorite lines here is that the birth of an ordinary life never leaves a trace, does it? This book is a solid attack on people in power, people who are sort of crushing the lives of those who are not born in power. I really felt that this is one of the best satire books that I've ever read, and this comes really close to Animal Farm, honestly. Now let's talk about Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift is definitely a book that all of you must know about because it's so famous, and we all have read at least about Lilliput when we were children because it was always a part of the syllabus in our school and many other schools. but actually Gulliver travels to 4 places, and the 4 places he goes to, he meets 4 different types of people, and these types of people are actually, you know, symbolisms of the types of people there were in his society. You know, some people who had so small mentality, some people who were so, you know, bound by science that they did not even look beyond it. They had just forgotten what emotions feel like. So it's a satire on the human nature of those times. And when I read Gulliver's Travels, after learning this fact in my first year, I was shook, because earlier I had never looked at Gulliver's Travels from that point of view. So the thing is, as you grow up, if you like just Google up a little bit, you'll see that a lot of books that you read are satires, you know. And even if a particular book is not a satire, sometimes there are statements which are very satirical, and being able to detect that is the best thing in the world. And the last book that I'll recommend to you is probably the most difficult book of all these, which is Candide by Voltaire. Now, this book is about this boy called Candide who gets banished from his house after he's found with Cunegonde. There is this one character in this book called Pangloss who is always saying very philosophical things, very optimistic things, and calling this the best of all worlds. But honestly, reality isn't that. And in this book, Voltaire did exactly that. He basically makes a farce out of philosophical musings, because reality and optimism are not the same thing. Sometimes you just have to see what the real things are, and by the end of this book you see things go so bad, so wrong, so terrible. You ask the same Pangloss if he can still say that this is the best of all worlds, because if this is the best of all worlds, what is the worst? And that is definitely something we need to think about. There are so many people all the time who call this world the best place, the world is at the best position ever, and I'm not arguing that it's not. It's way better than it was probably 200 or 300 years ago. But this is definitely not the best of all worlds. There's so much to do still. And we can't be philosophical shit all the time, because, you know, reality is sometimes very, very distant from what we imagine it to be. And this book makes you understand that. Voltaire got some really, really great backlash at that point of time, because these radical ideas were not that popular at that point of time. But I really, really loved reading this book. Honestly, I just picked it up because it was at my library, and I probably would not have picked it up if it was not that thin, because I was like carrying a very heavy bag that day. So yeah, that's basically why I picked up that book. But I'm so glad I did, because I will remember it till the end of my life. Also, make sure you're reading all these books if you want to read satirical novels, because I love them. If you want to read some more, I will recommend The White Tiger by Aravind Adiga. I have personally not finished reading that book, but a lot of people who have told me that it's amazing. A lot of people like it. Personally, it did not work out for me and I could not finish reading that book. But it may work out for you, so go check it out. Also, there's this amazing book called Noah by Moore. Once again, I've not read it, but I've heard that it's an amazing satire. Now, the special surprise for you, there is a giveaway that I'm hosting. I'm giving away one copy of Bestseller by Ahmed Fayaz and this t-shirt. So if you want to win it, just comment below with your favorite satire or why you want to read this particular genre, humor and satire, because I would love to know. And yeah, that is basically what you need to do. I will be picking up a winner by tomorrow, so please get commenting right away, and whoever wins, I'll ask you for your email ID. Please give it within 24 hours, else I will be picking up a new winner. So that will be all for today's video, guys. If you enjoyed it, make sure you give this video a big thumbs up and comment below with your favorite satire reads. I will be back with another video next week. Till then.